We are part of the Fired Up Sports Network of shows. Please check out other Fired Up Sports Network podcasts like the P-Lot Water Cooler Talk, Bell Smashers, Philly Sports Love and Pain, Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the P-LotPodcast. John here, joined once again by Michael. Michael, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing all right, Sports world might not be the funnest at the moment, but other than that, we're good.
That's a bit of a, it's kind of what I would expect from, that's probably the most mild take from someone what's going on with the Phillies right now.
Yeah.
2023 Eagles. Yeah. So, right now in sports, basketball, I mean, the Olympics is what's going on right now. The United States is,
they're taking care of business.
Expected to win the gold medal. I mean, if they don't win the gold medal, it's going to be a bigger deal for them not to win a gold medal than to win a gold medal. Yeah, I mean, hockey. All you got for the Flyers is just the Mitch Cobb interview and like him kind of like them showing him around like the
city, like
city and like Voorhees, like
and they're like tweeting him out like videos, like hype videos to get you excited. Anything he says, I get excited. I do have to say he's my shining star in all of this at all times. Like
it's just kind of like unless the Flyers got like Panarin or like
I mean the NHL dust
someone that's probably like the biggest move they could have made. So
the NHL dust has kind of settled for.
And for the Eagles, I mean, Michael, doesn't this feel like for the Eagles right now, this is like the most drama-free, like no.
Honestly, like I'm gonna say, I feel like this has been happening the last few years. I feel like the last 3 years, really, maybe even the last 4 years, but really the last 3 years, where we have had a pretty drama-free training camp, off season, etc. Like the closest thing we had to drama last year was when reporters were going up to Hassan Reddick saying, "Hey, don't you think you should be paid more?" And he was like, "I mean, like maybe, but I'm not going to really cause a problem about it right now." And like that was it. It was like the media trying to start something that wasn't happening at the moment. And other than that, like last year was a pretty seamless, not seamless, but a pretty uh like very like you said, drama free. And then this off season, it's less drama and more just like everyone's just kind of really interested to see what's going to happen. Everyone's intrigued to watch the offense play. Everyone's intrigued to see
Also,
who
like
wins
last
defensive
year
position
too,
battles.
dude. Well, also like last year too, it was like speculations. Is Jason Kelsey's last season? It was. Fletcher Cox's last season. It was.
Yeah.
And then just kind of like the whole. They lost the Super Bowl. How are they going to respond? And then they, I would say there was.
It's not even like drama per se.
Well, I would say drama, but like bad vibes or just like bad reports. Like, do you remember that like Hurts struggled in training camp
last year? And everyone was
we all wrote it off, and then it kind of like
blend the season a little bit. It was just the offense as a whole was just thoroughly disappointing. But no, I agree. Like this year, definitely like the most drama I guess has been like it was before the offseason even started. Like it was like when Hurts gave like a non-answer about his relationship with Sirianni and made everyone have to wait till training camp to get like an actual answer out of everybody. But it seems as though the team has talked to Hurts because every reporter is saying like, uncharacteristically, like Jalen Hurts showing some emotion after the nice touchdown for the offense there. Like it's just like it's almost like the upper management like bullied Jalen Hurts into showing a little bit more emotion because for whatever reason that was causing a big stir up among fans and media members and whatnot. So like other than that, like the drama is like what is the offense? It's like it's all football related. It's not like we have any contract issues going on. It's not like there's some like toxicity among the locker room or like
Oh my
there's,
yeah. Well, what I
anything
find,
bad.
well, it's like I feel like there's always like a good story, and when I say like a good story, it's like okay, this is like real. It's not like an undrafted rookie had a good day, and it's like we're
Mhm.
gonna, ultimately that guy might not even like make an
Make the
impact on the
team, yeah.
season. Yeah, or you know what I mean? It's like AJ Brown saying Devontae Smith
Unguardable, like
looks so much better than he did the previous years, which
speaks
which makes
volumes.
yeah, because it's like well, if you remember, yeah, like WIP specifically, like Spike Eskin was ragging on AJ Brown for being selfish and not getting the ball, and now he's picking up his teammate who they're 1 and 1A
Yeah.
respectively. He's like saying, "Oh, he's going to have a monster season," and it's like you know it's exciting to be like, who's going to have a better season, AJ Brown or Devontae Smith? Like that's an amazing like
Yeah, like, it's just an
thing to
amazing
have.
the fact that it's a conversation. It's like, who's gonna have a better season, my elite wide receiver 1 or my, like, elite other wide receiver who could easily be a wide receiver 1 anywhere else, and it's just, you know, that sort of discourse, and it's like Quinyon Mitchell not backing down and being toe to toe with AJ Brown and in any sort of rep and holding his own really nicely is very encouraging for an upcoming season against good receivers as there are in the NFL. It's just training camp overall, like knock on wood, has been like some good vibes overall. I think everyone's so giddy about how different the offense looks. I think the defensive concern's gonna be there, and it just might not be at the forefront because you're not playing games at the moment, but I think everyone's got some sort of cautious optimism, if you wanna say. Maybe it's cautious hope, with the defense, but what I think everyone was expecting to see and, well, hoping to see a big difference was in the offensive side of the ball, and I think everything that everybody has seen thus far in practice has been highly encouraging.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the only thing that I've really read that's like kind of concerning, I think it's kind of everyone's concern is the linebackers. Like
Yeah,
Jacoby hasn't looked
like,
good.
it's not even it's less I guess it's concern, but it's almost like I know it's not gonna be good. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd be more surprised if the linebacker group was, like, average than if it was bad, I have to
Well,
say.
I like Zach Bond. Like I think Vic Fangio thinks like Zach Bond's going to be like his new Andrew Van Ginkel. Like he's going to pick up this guy that you know bounced around, knows how to play multiple linebacker spots, and he's going to like unleash him, I suppose. But
Mhm.
because he can play like off ball and like pass or like edge at both kind of linebacker spots, which the Eagles love guys who are versatile. But then you have
Yeah,
like Derek. I'm sorry,
Devin.
Devin White, who like we basically have established that he blows.
Yeah, and it's like, hopefully I when people say, like, "Oh, he had good years when he came into the league," I just don't know how necessarily true that is. Like, I
Shaq
think
Leonard had good years when he came in the league before he blew his back out and couldn't
Right.
run and tackle anymore.
Right, like, he was actually good. I think Devin White, like, I don't know if he was ever really that
Well, he
great
was
and
good
just
he,
was
like his like rookie year and his second year, and then he
uh,
basically
I
fell
don't know,
off
like,
because I think offenses figured out how to.
attack it. Like, it's just
Yeah,
any sort of success he's had in the league has really been just kind of the product of being next to Levante David, who's one of the most, you know
and Shaq Leonard,
Yeah, but not Shaq Leonard, Shaq Barrett you're thinking of
Shaq
as a
Barrett,
pass
excuse
rusher.
me.
Yeah, but, um just being, like, off ball with Levante David, who's, one of the most, like, decorated linebackers in terms of their leadership ability and, like, a true captain of the defense, like, knowing everything that's going on and knowing where everyone's supposed to be and just commanding that sort of respect as a great linebacker, playing off that as just someone with good athleticism and being used a lot as a blitzer. like, in those sort of situations, yes, Devin White can thrive, but any sort of time Devin White has been more so like the mainstay, like, post of the defense in the center, it's just been pretty disappointing, and I feel like that's just simply gonna probably be his role here. I mean, he got benched at the end of last year even as that secondary guy,
Yeah,
so
and I think the Eagles like approach this year is going to be like, God, this is going to sound like kind of, I don't know. This you're going to be like, you're going to probably roll your eyes when I say this. They're kind of taking like a 2019, 2018, maybe even like 2020 Kansas City Chiefs like approach where our
mm.
offense is going to score a ton of points and we just need our defense to make key stops and we'll win a lot of games that way.
Yeah, I mean, we know how, the Chiefs over the years have shifted into almost like a defense first team that just happens to have Mahomes and Kelsey to be able to it's like the other way. It's like the defense keeps you in it the whole time, and those guys are just eventually going to score points, and you can't keep them off the board forever. Um, yeah, I do think the Eagles are gonna be obviously very heavily offensive oriented, trying to light up the scoreboard, and the defense just gonna have to make plays. And a lot of making plays is gonna reside in, like, that defensive line, which is pretty much a question mark, not in, like, a bad way, but in just, like, we really don't know what we're gonna get from key guys who are going to be playing a lot of snaps, and their performance is going to dictate whether this defense is a solid group or not, really. Like, you know, we've liked what we've seen out of Jalen Carter last year, and we like what we're seeing at a camp with him. We've been disappointed by Jordan Davis, but we're liking what we're seeing at a camp with him. And like Nolan Smith, we didn't really see much of at all last year. But again, like expectations are high riding on him, and it's not even us. It's the Eagles. Like this is what the Eagles' hope is. Like if they didn't believe in it, I'm sure they would have done their due diligence to keep Hassan Reddick and maybe still add someone like Bryce Huff or whatever. Like there was always like going to be ways to bandage up things if they felt it was necessary, and them being content with trading away Hassan Reddick lends me to believe that they're relying heavily on Nolan Smith and someone like him to kind of take a
And
leap.
Bryce
And
Huff.
yeah, and Bryce Huff, who
They're
obviously great
basically
success in the pass rush, but
they're aggregating
Hassan
Hassan
Reddick,
Reddick with
yeah,
Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, and they still have Josh Sweat who
Brandon Graham, they still have
and Brandon
guys,
Graham.
but and so those three young guys, and then I guess Bryce Huff to throw him in there for, and then you look at your veterans, needing Josh Sweat to have a bounce back season. There's a lot of trust in that group, and I think a lot of the success is gonna hinge on those guys being what this team hopes they can be, and what we've seen from them in the past or whatever. So, that's why I think the biggest concern obviously is the defense, but I think the biggest question mark that has the biggest ceiling is the defensive line, and you're just gonna have to kinda wait and see, honestly, until the regular season starts on how it ends up looking. Like, the linebackers are a question mark slash bad with a pretty low ceiling in terms of how good they can be. I feel pretty good about the secondary, all things considered, honestly. I love what I'm seeing out of the competition in that second and nickel corner spots. I think it's very, like, healthy competition. There's legitimate options that they have to start. Um, and I feel obviously good about Slay, and the safety room I feel generally good about. Uh, but it's the defensive line is going to be the X factor on if the defense like blows or is solid.
So we're talking like so. I think we should probably move off of the Eagles training camp because there's really not a whole lot going on. Obviously, this
The offense
upcoming
is
week they're
fun.
going to play their first preseason game against Baltimore.
That's
Um,
this week.
it's possible, from what I've read, they may have the starters play one or two series and then immediately just yank them.
I
The
mean, we know
Eagles.
we haven't seen Jalen play in a while in the preseason, so
Yeah, and I think like the approach is the more physical camp they know that they had an embarrassing end of the season, and we were. I think we were in such shock at how bad they collapsed. It was like, is this some sort of like fever dream?
Yeah,
Like,
like it was every week they were playing another bad opponent, and it was like, well, they'll figure it out, right? And they just couldn't against some of the worst teams in the league, and you know they're really preaching the accountability aspect. So, like you said, the more physical practices. I mean, they're doing full padded practices, which I don't even know if they did one last year. And so, yeah, we might see a little bit of differences in how they attack preseason games. It's not to say I think it should be the classic, like, oh, by the second preseason game or third, whatever, Jalen Hurts should play like a whole half. I don't need to see a half of Jalen Hurts. I can max stomach a quarter, but I'm okay with really seeing like a drive or two, and it's fine.
like opening drive touchdown,
Yeah,
yay,
that's it. Go
take him
take your
out.
helmet off, and that's fine. Like they're doing the physical practices. They're running gassers if they're making mistakes. All the leaders are preaching accountability and stuff. So it's good. I really do think that they're aware of how bad it was. And listen, you don't need to dwell on it. I don't need to have reporters asking the players every day, "Oh, what feels different about this year compared to last year? How does last year's collapse affect how you guys are going?" Like I don't need those questions anymore. It's clear they're taking a different approach because of it. I don't need to keep hearing about it, but the players are sick of hearing about it and they want to rewrite it, so they're going to have, an opportunity this season, and they're clearly taking it by the taking the bull by the horns immediately, the way they're going about their training camp. So
So, yeah. So now that we're in training camp, there's a bunch of big stories that have come out. Let's just go with the one that's kind of been percolating for a long time now, and that's the status of Brandon Ayuk. So, do you follow Pretty Ricky at all on Twitter?
I've been been seeing his tweets the last how many ever weeks or so, but yes, I have been seeing it.
Like, he apparently breaks news.
Yeah, and he was saying that the Ayuk trade was happening, perhaps. But now there's reports that there's
Like he,
potential
like he said
to
that the Cowboys have a 4 year, hundred something million, $133 million extension with CeeDee Lamb.
it
Like,
was like 34.5 million a year, whatever that math adds up to be.
but he hasn't. The Cowboys haven't announced it, and he hasn't shown up to camp yet.
Right, so that's a little is he
It's a
just making
little
stuff up? Like,
fugazi.
maybe, but
So the big thing is, like, apparently Ayuk was at camp in street clothes, shaking hands with Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, and then I think another player, and then
like
he
there
kind
was
of
a hug and people couldn't tell if it was like a we just traded you hug or like a happy you're here hug. And there's reports now that you sent me coming out that it looks like there's some sort of deal in place to keep him in San
and
Francisco.
then apparently that's been refuted.
Yeah, so there's a lot of drama. At least he's there, I guess, in the building. Um, Clearly more positive. I think as much as he talks, he does want to be there. I think he enjoys, winning, and likes the kind of situation he has himself in terms of how he does succeed. I know there's reasons to be bothered with on who gets the credit or whatever for their success instead of just as a collective unit. It's always got to be someone individual out there. But he's one of the best receivers in the league, and I think at this point, majority of people do know that he's like the best receiver on the team, and and I think the Niners know that too. That if he was traded away, that their offense I think would definitely take some sort of bump in the road, especially now that they're going to get rid of the CFL type motion where it appears that guys are getting turning up field and getting a running start before the before the right before the ball snapped so they can get some sort of advantage. It's been abused really by the 49ers and the Dolphins at length, and they're going to, I guess, be a little more strict on enforcing that. So, taking that aspect away while also losing your best receiver, I think could be a recipe for some growing pains for the 49ers offense, but
What a
it
fit of
feels like
irony. Everyone complained about the tush
yes.
push, and now like
And now the
Kyle
motion's getting
Shanahan's Fugazi
motion.
CFL motion, which was like basically finding a loophole in the rules
Yeah,
to
watching Tyreek Hill's body start bending and getting essentially almost running upfield for a half a step before the ball's even snapped. I mean, what corner is going to ever keep up with that in Miami? But yeah, so interesting to see how that unfolds. There's still a handful of holdouts that we're waiting to see how it unfolds. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb.
because let's just kind of fantasy GM real quick. If
Sure.
I was with my buddies at work, and we were like, let's see in the 2025 draft who has more than one first round pick.
Okay.
Because I think Ayuk, you need to trade a first to get him.
Yeah, I think if
He's a
IU
top 10
or
receiver.
Lamb, I think that's minimum getting a first, and it's like going to be a
So
first and a
every
second.
team has their first round pick in next year's NFL draft currently right now.
Okay.
But the team that has a lot of ammunition is the Bills.
Well, what did they get back for
They got a 2 for
Diggs?
Diggs.
Okay.
And if they made some other, and
Bills.
then they made a trade with the Vikings, where they traded their first round pick to the Vikings in the last
Okay.
draft for more picks.
So Buffalo's an interesting landing spot that I think would be like I think about, the receivers. There's two guys that are at threats to be traded, and like Brandon Ayuk's one of them, CeeDee Lamb's the other one. Um, you've heard like, oh, this Commanders with Ayuk because he likes, he's friends with Jaden Daniels, would want to go play with him. But then you hear like the Steelers, the Ravens, or whatever. The Bills is one I haven't heard that I am intrigued by, and I think would be something worth calling. Um, but my fantasy GM brain goes to like a 2-year hyper, rebuild it up plan for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is, you trade for Brandon Ayuk this season, this offseason, and then you throw all the money at the world at Dak Prescott if he's hits free agency after the year, and you kind of, you know, now all of a sudden you got a quarterback and
Yeah,
an
well,
elite receiver
so
duo.
so the corpse of Russell Wilson. I'm sorry, Russell.
Yeah,
The corpse of Russell Wilson is not
yeah.
currently practicing with the Steelers, so
Mhm.
Justin Fields is getting all the reps with the ones. I think Justin Fields is going to be the Bears starting Bears. He's going to be the Steelers starting quarterback
I'd
because
still be kind of shocked. Not
dude,
shocked, but
Russ blows.
I
Like
know he does. I know.
he blows,
But I think
dude.
I mean, how much do the Steelers care about that conditional pick? You know? The condition was
But
50% of the
if Justin
snaps.
Fields, if like I don't know, here's the thing: is that Arthur Smith. Listen, all jokes aside, he's a complete doofus, right? Let's just
He
whatever.
schemes up good running plays, at
But
least.
he had like Ryan Tannehill was but at one point was a mobile quarterback. He was a converted wide receiver to quarterback in college. He
Yeah,
can move,
Tannehill had some legs on him for sure, especially
right?
on those good
And
Titans
now he
teams.
has like basically like the souped up version of Tannehill, right?
Mhm.
In Fields. They have two running backs, which is great because that's what he wanted in Atlanta.
Mhm.
And if they trade for Ayuk, then now they have their AJ Brown.
Two well, they get two very good wide receivers out there.
Pickens is probably gonna they might trade they could trade Pickens to the Niners
Oh,
because
Jesus.
Pickens got into a massive argument with his wide receiver coach.
Yeah, I'd be intrigued to see. I feel like if you're Pittsburgh, you gotta try to keep both. But point being is, yes, Arthur Smith has had success in this league with a quarterback that I think has a skill set similar-ish to Justin Fields. And I do just think that that conditional pick might mean a little bit more to Pittsburgh, I think, for them to just name Fields the week 1
I
starter
mean,
and
the
ride it.
Niners drafted the Niners reached in the first round for a wide receiver. Like
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah.
that tells me that's one of them's gone. And if you're going
I
to
think
lock Ayuk
wow.
long term, that means Debo's going to be gone, or they know Ayuk's gone. That's the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicting reports out there. You're not really getting anything from, like, Schefter or Rappaport. You're getting more just
I
side
wonder. I wonder if Pearsall just blows like a training camp. They're like, we need to keep Ayuk. Like,
maybe. I think by any means necessary, you need to keep Ayuk and figure it out. Like, I truly I do believe that heavily
they
with,
don't have the money. You got to pay. You got to pay Rat Boy $60 million.
you're paying, yeah, which that's crazy. And you're paying like McCaffrey, you talk about paying a running back, and it's not that it's not deserved, but he does get a lot of money and takes up a lot of space. It's
Well,
New
yeah,
York.
and if McCaffrey needs a new deal, like, what's he gonna do? Is he just gonna be like, yeah, you know what, running
I'll
backs,
take a huge
hellscape, I'll
discount.
take $8 million a year?
Yeah,
No,
no, he's gonna get like
no.
he's making like 16 or whatever it is. So, yeah, I mean, he's gonna it's a tough situation to navigate, and I think that they made the mistake by I don't know. Is it a mistake that they paid Debo? I don't know. Like that's a lot of like foresight you got to have. It's a tough call. You want to keep the core together. I mean, is Trent Williams reported yet? Like, it's just what a nightmare that kind of is at the moment.
There is another story I wanted to bring up. It
Mhm,
involves, and I think you know where I'm going with this one.
mhm.
It involves a certain team in Los Angeles that you once on this show said, and I quote, should be relegated from the National Football League. That is the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, Michael,
Yeah, they're rebuilding
my
the
hot
culture out
take
there.
for the 2024 Chargers was they're going to be the worst team in the league.
Yeah, and they are.
And that is no longer a hot take. That is a lukewarm to cold take because Justin Herbert, top 5 quarterback. Well, when he's healthy, he's a top 5 quarterback.
Mhm,
When he's not surrounded by dog crap, he's a top 3 quarterback in the
mhm.
NFL, I think. He's got a Liz Frank sprain in his foot. And while when you hear the word sprain, you think, oh, that's not too bad. Liz Frank sprains are pretty serious injuries. And from
Yeah,
the perspective of they don't heal during the season, you often need surgery. And you need to basically need a whole year for it to recover.
yeah, and look at excuse me. They gave him what? They said it's gonna be what, like 3 weeks until he's
They
back,
claim
which
he's going to rest his foot for 3 weeks, and they're going to see if he feels better. He'll start week 1. He's going to miss all of their training camp in a brand new offense, and he's
yeah,
just going
brand
to.
new run heavy, like ground and pound. Like it's gonna look like what the Niners looked like back in the day. It's gonna look like what Michigan looked like. They're gonna run the ball like we talked about it when they first hired him. That people might start giving Herbert his respect because they might start eventually winning more games, but it'll be when Herbert's being asked to do a lot less, and they're just getting a more positive win result. Not that his play doesn't result to wins, but just it just
The
was just how it
greatest
was gonna
game
work out.
manager in NFL history is going to be Justin Herbert.
Right, which is so, like,
Stupid.
unbelievable considering how talented and how good of a thrower he is, but, yeah, I guess they're where we might get a little taste without it to start the year.
Well, keep
It's
in
really
mind,
something.
Harbaugh was really run heavy because he
Mhm.
won a lot of games.
Yeah, but it's just like, even in San Francisco, like, the
Well, that's
run
because he had
heavy.
Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick. They weren't exactly known for slinging the ball
I mean,
40,
you
50
drafted
times a
Alex
game.
Smith first overall or whatever, like,
No, he
you'd
didn't.
hope.
No, Alex Smith
Well,
was like
he
a
didn't, I
bust for
guess he
like
was
six
there, yeah,
years.
before he got there, yeah, he did. The thing he does though is that he wins. Like weirdly enough, you don't think of Jim Harbaugh. I guess you do, but it's like he turned around and took a bad Niner roster the first year he got there and, took them to double-digit wins, and I think that this is not to say that the Chargers are gonna win 10 games or whatever, but there's certainly a culture that he instills that tends to result in winning, and, that culture is certainly gonna be tested early on when their quarterback is recovering from what's gonna be like a non-healable injury for quite some time, and we're gonna have to see, how he looks when he plays, and there's gonna be that inherent injury risk now to re-injure it, that sort of thing, and, that's a tough spot. He's been dealing with, you know he dealt with a lot of injuries last season, so we'll see how this season plays out, but it's not looking pretty for the
Yeah, I
Chargers.
think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna play this season at all.
Wow.
I'm going to tell you why. This is my theory. This is kind of like my
Well,
tinfoil hat. The Chargers are in cap hell.
mhm,
They didn't really make any moves to accrue more draft picks. The
mhm.
conspiracy theory was thrown out that maybe they should trade Herbert to get like 4 or 5 first rounders in this draft and just load up on other positions and then maybe draft JJ McCarthy
Mhm.
because Herbert, it's not that he doesn't fit Harbaugh's offense. It's like it's it's like he's an expensive piece that's just not going to be used as much because you're not throwing the ball 40 times a game.
I don't think you can trade
And by the way, I thought that was
quarter.
idiotic, incredibly idiotic at the time. That was just something that was thrown out there.
Yeah.
I could see the Chargers this kind of being like when Peyton had that neck injury and he missed the whole season for the Colts in 2011. They purposefully tanked to get Andrew Luck. I can see the Chargers purposefully tanking because this is Harbaugh's team. Harbaugh has
Mhm.
full control of the team except for signing the checks, and they're just gonna try to pick first overall. And if like Quinn Ewers has a monster season, they'll trade that pick for a bazillion picks, like the Bears did.
Okay, so you're not saying they're gonna draft a quarterback,
They're gonna
but
do what the Bears did when in 2023, where they traded
trade a Bryce
they
Young.
won a Bryce Young trade package to like fix the team.
Yeah, and I think okay, that's something that's interesting and that I could believe
The NFL
if
is a
Herbert doesn't play.
copycat league. If if someone's gonna give up, if like Quinn Ewers, you know, because the Texas is in the SEC this year, I believe,
Yes.
right? If
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers starts lighting up the SEC, like these teams are such degens, Michael, he'll go first overall because the team's going to desperately need a quarterback.
Yeah, listen, if Ewers has a good year, there's gonna be teams that are all over him, whether that be the Giants, whether that be the Cowboys, whether that be, you know, all the quarterback hungry teams out there. Someone might be willing to pay, especially a team like Dallas, where they'd have to
Oh yeah,
move
if
up
you're the
a
oh my
lot.
god, the Chargers, yeah, you want Quinn Ewers because you don't have Dak anymore. Give us Micah and a first round pick.
Right, like you could really build out a team with some sort of huge trade haul and then get Herbert fully healthy and then rock. Yeah, yeah, I think there's something there. Interesting. Interesting. Something to keep an eye on with Herbert. It's a shame he keeps getting hurt, but it's something to be interested about.
Agreed. So Michael, is there anything football before we move on to baseball you want to talk about?
Um, no, we kinda already talked about Lamb and the Cowboys last week, so yeah, I'm good.
All right, so Michael, baseball roundup. I think now that we're kind of past the halfway point in Major League Baseball, I think it wouldn't be bad before we go into the trade deadline. We maybe talk about some of the current teams and the standings and how things are looking, and maybe
Mhm.
project how the rest of the season's going to go.
Sure.
So I have the MLB standings pulled up.
Mhm.
The American League, it's a dogfight between the Orioles and the Yankees, and the
In the
Orioles
AL East.
in the AL East. The Orioles had a very active trade deadline where they basically tried to acquire every former Philly or current Phillies reliever slash starter they could possibly get their hands on.
Yeah, they did a lot of work to get a lot of like, the Orioles, they looked at the deadline, I think, with, like, "We have the best farm in baseball. We might as well use it because eventually we're not just gonna be able these guys aren't just all gonna be able to come up and play." So, we were fortunate enough to draft and develop and build out this elite farm system that we might as well use some of it to our advantage and trade off of some of the guys. And to that point, I think overpaid for some guys. Even someone like Gregory Soto, I think the Orioles traded like a top 10 prospect of theirs for a guy who like is looking for a change of scenery. Like that's definitely like an upside sort of angle to trade for Soto. Like he's had some success with the Phillies, hasn't seen sort of the same success he saw in Detroit with the Phillies yet. And you were just hoping that a change of scenery would get him better, and obviously mightily struggled in his first outing. Um, trading a player you're not actively using in Austin Hayes for Sir Anthony Dominguez. Acquiring Zach Eflin for some good like the Orioles were just they were active. They traded a lot of good prospects, and I think they got a lot of like mediocre ish players that just kind of filled needs that they had for this season to hope to like sustain a playoff run. But we'll see. But regardless, they were pretty active as they kind of should have been.
Yeah, and then we have obviously the New York Yankees. They are like one and 1-1 A right now. They're both tied for the American League East right now with 65 wins. Yankees made a lot of moves, but they made one extremely notable move, acquiring the exciting, hyper talented guy. We both thought that if he went to a new team, he would probably make an impact. Fortunately, it was against the Phillies to start. Jazz Chisholm.
Yeah. Acquiring him to play third base because Glaber has no interest in playing third base, despite the fact that
He
I don't know.
sucks.
Yeah, he just
He
whatever.
blows.
He's not gonna get re-signed. He's got the most errors in the league by a second baseman. He wasn't good at third base either. It's just all kind of he's just not a good player at the moment. But they went and got Jazz, who, I think everyone recognized was not as good as, Major League Baseball trying to prop him up, putting him on the cover of, the show, and then he didn't really hit the stride that I think everyone thought he was, but thus far in his Yankees career has been a huge, huge boost of energy into that lineup and that clubhouse as a whole, and made a huge impact. Was a massive reason that they swept the Phillies. And the Yankees are hoping that can ride in a nice playoff run. He seems to be happier out there. They also made some trades for, some pitching like Mark Leiter Jr. and whatnot. But yeah, the oh, I forgot the one big overpay for Baltimore. That the one that I forgot to mention was
Austin
um,
Hayes for Sir Anthony.
no, 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 because we'll talk about the Phillies ones. But um, Trevor Rogers, that was the bad one.
He blows, dude.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
sucks.
yeah.
Like,
That's just not a good pitcher that they traded like top 5 prospects for to Miami.
oh,
Um,
bro, like that. When they did
that
that,
was
dude.
bad. That was bad. That's
Well,
the one I was thinking of when I'm thinking they gave up big prospects to not get a great return back. And
yeah,
Trevor Rogers is the guy.
because like, look, the there's another like the I would say the best starting pitcher that got moved might have been Eric Fetty
Yeah, Fetty's having a great year. Um, but it just probably yes. Like there was a lot of
or Jack
average.
Flaherty.
Yeah, he was having a nice bounce back. I mean, like, Kikuchi got moved for a lot, but it's like something like Trevor Rogers, for example, just not a great pitcher, never really kind of has been. And the Orioles making that sort of move, I just, feels like that could have been allocated elsewhere, and it's why like, the Orioles aren't necessarily a team that over especially the recent last few years, have they been a team that have shown that they can, like, develop pitching into something really, really good? Like, no, like, we know how good their bats have been, but their biggest downfall was their lack of rotation power last year, and so they went and addressed that with Corbin Burns, and he's been their best pitcher, but again, that's not something they developed. Then they went and got Zach Eflin, they went and got Trevor Rogers. I you're getting Trevor Rogers hoping you can, like, figure something out of it. If you're getting him for what he's been giving in Miami, I mean, that's just a bad, stupid trade. So you're getting him hoping he gets better and,
I think they
you know
probably wanted Kikuchi, and then that fell
I mean, the
through.
Astros overpaid, like, that's another thing,
That's
like,
what I mean. Well, like, the Baltimore has that, like, the void out in left field. If you
Mhm.
hit a ball over there, it's not going to be a
It's
home
not
run.
land yeah, it's
It's not going to be a home run. So
mostly gonna
if you
get
have a
caught.
lefty, a lefty pitcher, that's going to really help them out. I think that's kind of why they wanted to overpay that lefty,
Mhm.
but they didn't want to pull, the Tigers did want to pull the trigger on trading Tariq Skubal.
Which good for them, they shouldn't have.
I agree. So that's kind of why we saw a lot of these massive overpays.
Yeah, I think
Um,
yeah. So do you wanna keep going through the American League, or do we wanna just get into
Yeah,
the
I
trade
mean,
deadline?
like the
Okay.
Red Sox, they're in the wild card race as well.
They're in it, 5.5 outs,
They
not
got Danny Jansen from the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays were big sellers, but they didn't trade Bo Bichette or Vlad Jr., which I thought was smart because
I think you gotta let it ride again. Like, you gotta retool in the offseason, go get some actual help and take some of the pressure off those 2 guys. And not that Vlad's been having a great year, but Bichette, obviously injured, but having a
oh boy,
poor year too. So, yeah, they could use some serious help in the offseason. And Tampa seemingly, they traded a Rosarena early and sold off some more pieces, which then leads us to the Central, where the Guardians, I mean,
Lane
they
Thomas.
yeah, like, they got Alex Cobb, um, Lane Thomas, which I thought was a nice little move for them. Um, I think I they didn't do anything, like, extravagant. They just
Well, they're
kinda
like
just filled out the roster.
they're like the new like Moneyball, like athletics of the
They're like the
2000s team.
Rays. They're like the Rays. I think of them like, obviously their pitching, which, their pitching's been their strong suit for as long as I can remember, and their starting pitching this year has been rather uninspiring and rather disappointing. Their bullpen has been stupendous. It's been incredible. Totally shut
Yeah,
down.
when Ben Lively is like your second or third
And he's
best
having a
starting
nice
pitcher,
year, but
that's
it's just
that's not good. Like you don't want to
yeah,
start Ben Lively in a playoff game.
right. And they're going to. Like he's having a nice year. Um, he's been one of their better pitchers. Their starting rotation's been pretty poor. Tristan McKenzie hasn't given them what they hoped, but their bullpen's been really good and their offense has been like despite not being the most firepower offense. They do have some nice players. Steven Kwan, Jose Ramirez, the Nailers have been hitting well. They got some guys, and
Joe Aneski, Noel.
yeah, like yeah, Janeski, Noel. They got guys, and getting Lane Thomas like that kind of fits the bill. It's just like another guy that's nothing too crazy, but you know
The team
they're
and
they're they're
then
gonna win that division.
the
But
team that I find the most exciting is the Royals because of one player. He's probably my favorite non-Phillies player right now in the league, and
mhm.
that's Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah, Bobby Wood's been. I mean, he's hitting like 500 since the All-Star break, which is just I've simply never seen someone hit 500 for that long of a period of time. Like I just don't understand. Um,
Like it's insane to think, but
Genuine five-tool player.
if he like continues this for another couple years, he's the best player they've had since George Brett, which is insane.
It's not a hard list to crack, I have to say,
It is really
unfortunately.
not a hard list to crack, but
But
it's like they won a World Series. You know what I mean?
they
Like,
won a World Series with like a bunch of nice players. I don't think there was one star on that World Series winning team. Like they
yeah,
were very good players, but like there wasn't a player where it's like you're going down a list of the top players in baseball. You simply weren't naming a Royal for a while. And again, they're not an indictment. They won a World Series. But yeah, so the Royals, they're enticing for the future. I'm intrigued by the Tigers for the future as well. Obviously, they traded Flaherty, but
and Canna.
um, and Canna, but they got Scooble, they got some pieces back. I think they're not poised to figure it out or whatever, but I think that they're gonna eventually get back up there in the rest of that division.
Do you find it weird when you mentioned that you just mentioned the Tigers
Mhm.
that like you saw teams like acquire a player and then get rid of a veteran at the same time?
Yeah,
That was
it's like a mini cell. Like, it's what the who this what did the Padres sell away? Or did they not? Am I misremembering?
no, the Padres
Uh,
bought like crazy. We'll talk about them.
yeah, they did end up only buying everything. Who am I thinking of that had a Oh, it was the Cubs. The Cubs had a mini, like
Yeah, they picked up Isak Paredes.
yeah, and they traded away, like, Morel. Like, the Cubs had a little but
Well,
anyways,
in the
regardless.
same trade, like I thought it was a bad move. Not no offense to Paredes, but Paredes to me just felt like a Tampa Bay Rays like creation, not
Well,
like a
I think he's a nice player, but I think, we talks about he really benefits from that stadium. Um,
oh,
you
you
know
mean the Fugazi cutout in left field?
Yeah, just pulling the ball down the line, getting a lot of home runs, and the Cubs are the furthest left field line in baseball. I mean, Paredes got his first hit as a Cub, and it would have been a homer in Tampa. And like, it's just like, wow, Morel's homered in those first few games. Just an interesting move, all in all. This will be a good segue into the West. I thought he would have been a really nice Astro, Paredes. I felt like with the Crawford boxes and everything about it, like that just could have been a uh, nice little move there. But the Astros, they made their huge
You didn't mention
trade.
about the White Sox and how
Oh,
they basically
I
were the.
mean, the
I think they were the biggest losers at the trade deadline.
yeah, I mean the White Sox, they're 41 and a half games back of first place. They are 27 and 85. They are not poised to figure it out. They kept Robert, which I think is fine because I think they asked the moon for Luis Robert and no one was offering the moon. Um, I think I think they kinda got screwed by Garrett Crochet.
They did.
Um, like, totally, we're gonna trade him, and then he comes out and says, "Any team that's gonna acquire me is gonna need to extend me if they want me to pitch in the playoffs for them, and if they ask me to go into the bullpen, I'm not gonna do it because I don't think that's good for my health." And listen, should I bash Garrett Crochet for caring about his long-term health? If he gets traded to a contender and he doesn't feel like his arm's stretched out for a playoff run because, he was playing for the White Sox and didn't expect to be ready for a playoff run. I it's hard for me to it's really it's tough because it is hard for me to kill Crochet. Like, does he really wanna go to the Dodgers per se and start throwing all these innings in October? They get bounced in, like, the NLCS or whatever, and his arm, he needs, like, surgery in the offseason or is dead arm by the end of the playoffs, and it's just a mess. Like, it's hard to kill him for that. It just the way it all turned around where it was like, I need an extension or else I simply will not throw in the playoffs and don't even think about putting me in the bullpen, just totally evaporated his trade market. I don't think anyone had any more interest in him at that point. I think teams were willing to get him as a rental, and then if impressed over the playoffs would have been down to re-sign them. I mean, I think, the Braves
Well, he
were a
still
team
has a
that
lot
was
of
in,
years of
but
control. That's the thing. It's not like he's a
what's
free
his
agent.
contract look like?
He doesn't have a whole lot of MLB service time
Garrett
because he's been
Crochet.
injured a lot.
Wait a second. So, oh my God. So he's a free agent at the end of. I didn't know this. He's a free agent in 2027. We're obviously
Like, that's my point.
So he wanted his. Okay. So he did. Yeah. I understand not wanting to get hurt or whatever, but you do have 3 arbitration years left that I know you wanted bought out, but you could have proved to get that bought out fairly, where the White Sox were kind of put in a bind where it was just like teams simply had no more interest in acquiring it after he said all that, which does screw them. But I think their biggest mistake was that 3-team trade where the White Sox let Eric Fetty, Tommy Pham, and Miguel Vargas and Michael Kopech, or sorry, not Miguel Vargas, Michael Kopech, all go. And I just didn't think, like,
It just seemed lazy.
How did they, like, they traded 3 good trade chips. Eric Fetty was like you said, probably the best starter on the market, or the starter on the market that was having the best season. They traded Michael Kopech, who we knew contenders would be in on because he does still have really good stuff out of a bullpen arm. Teams with good bullpens, good pitching development, trusting to figure it out, and we've seen him look very nice with the Dodgers thus far. And trading Tommy Pham, who's just been a reliable bat on playoff caliber teams for the last 4 seasons. So those were 3 legitimately good trade pieces to send away, and to get just measly prospect return. None of the 3 prospects are top flight prospects. It felt like they just kind of threw away some of it's like, oh, we'll just throw in Tommy Pham
Like, you
for no
throw away
reason.
Eloy Jimenez because he's practically useless right now.
Yeah,
That's
which
one thing.
that just they were just getting rid of guys, which I couldn't really wrap my head around. This is why teams stay bad. It's the worst team in baseball by a mile that isn't going to be good for some time, and they're not acquiring any pieces that'll speed up that timeline even remotely. There's just no way that those 3
You can't
teams made
tell
a
me
trade and
that,
they didn't get
like,
anything back.
I mean, look.
I'll get to it. I think the Marlins won the deadline, but we'll get to it.
Yeah, but sorry, let's just go back to the West again. I mean, the Astros.
Yeah, the Astros violent overpay on UC Kikuchi. Astros fans are in shambles when they saw that
Because
prospect
this
was.
team is not good enough, I don't think, to even make the ALCS.
Well, I mean, I think they're inevitable, and they will anyways. But point being is that I was seeing Astros fans on Twitter saying, "Don't trade." Astros fans on Twitter saying, "Don't trade Loper Fido for Vlad." It was I don't want to do that. I like Loper Fido. I don't want him as a centerpiece in a Guerrero deal where he's been inconsistent.
Even though Vlad Jr., if he went to the Astros, would probably be a
it
30
would probably become
guy.
Jesus Christ. But they were totally it was I wouldn't want to trade Loper Fido for a lot of what was out there, and then they see that they traded him for
That's just it. Well, dude, that's kind of it I think with the bad teams in baseball, like the Astros.
It was a seller's market for sure.
Well, it's because, and like you're saying, it's inevitable, dude. The Astros pitching blows. That's that's the key difference between what they're good teams and this team.
Mm-hmm.
Framber has lost all aura. He is
Mm-hmm.
auraless right now.
Mm-hmm.
Verlander can't stay healthy.
No, their rotation's as bad as it's been since they've entered this era, and their bullpen, it's it's just not, compare everything to 2022. It's just not that. And their offense has been banged up and, inconsistent at times.
Yeah, this is what's going to happen. They're going to play the Yankees in the ALDS, and then the Astros fans are going to be like, "Oh, we always beat the Yankees," and then the Yankees will beat them, and then it'll be like them winning the World Series. Like, oh my god, we finally beat like basically like the zombified Astros, basically, and then they'll lose in the LCS again.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyway, I mean the Mariners getting Randy Rosarania for not peanuts, but
yeah, the Mariners. I liked what the Mariners did. I thought Arozarena was a nice trade. That's another team that's sold. Like they trade Ryan Stanek to the Mets, but then they replaced that with Yimi Garcia. They got Justin Turner after DFAing Ty France, which I thought was strange. Obviously, Justin Turner to Grand Slam last night, veteran proven, but I didn't feel like those two players was some sort
well, I
of
mean Ryan Stanek
upgrade.
this year is pretty bad.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying like it's just they traded away some guys, they acquired some guys. Um, Obviously their big chip was Randy Rosarania, which felt like, a steal because of just where the prospects were ranked, but I think those Mariner prospects were pretty good that they gave up, but I just think that Rosarania, his like playoff voodoo, whatever he has that makes him become one of the best hitters ever in the playoffs.
The
That's just
irony of that is the Mariners might not even make the playoffs.
yeah. I do think they will. I think, but they definitely need some work to do, and they needed some sort of boost to the lineup, and I think Randy does that a little bit. Uh, Next, we're talking about the Texas Rangers here, who World Series hangover, you know, to the max. Total disappointing season, which felt like you could have saw it coming. They were a team that, not barely got in the playoffs, but you know, like that choked away their division on the last day of the playoffs, and then an anomaly of they were the best road team in like playoff history, and were able to carry that all the way to a World Series. They are having a highly, highly um, disappointing season. And then this is a team that had they didn't know what they wanted to do at the deadline. They sold Michael Lorenzen to the Royals, who are going to be who the Rangers are competing with to make the playoffs for one of those wild card spots. But then they also acquired Andrew Shaffin and Carson Kelly, both from the Tigers, for a couple pools of prospects that just kind of fill it out. So they kind of just rode the middle ground, which is kind of, I guess, on par for what their season's been this far. Scherzer just went on the IL, so they've been pretty disappointing through and through.
Yeah, Andrew, I call Chaffin or Chafin because
Is it not Shaffin? I thought it was always Shaffin.
I mean, he's
It
got a
could be
3.5.
Chafin.
He's not having a good year. He's got a 1.42 WHIP, like 3.55 ERA. He's okay.
It's just what he's been. Like it's like they got a couple guys to help out, but moving off Lorenzen, who was having a nice solid year in Texas, coming off whatever he was here for the Phillies. Yeah, but the Rangers they have an uphill battle to sort of get back into a playoff race that just feels
Were you
pretty hopeless.
were you surprised with the last two teams? They didn't trade more.
Um,
The Angels and the Athletics.
like the Angels, as much as everyone like talked about, like they traded away Carlos Estevez to the Phillies, obviously, which on paper, if I'm the Angels, I think you got to be pleased with this move. It was a rental closer for two A-ball pitching prospects that, you know, we talked about. If the Angels were to be trusted, I think that's a nice move. Like I was decently high on the Italian and George Klassen. I think those two prospects were pretty nice, and I trusted the Phillies that if they kept both those guys, like Klassen could have peaked at like a middle of the rotation sort of guy once he got to the majors, and I think the Italian could have been a nice back end rotation piece in the major leagues. But we talk about how little faith we have in the Angels organization to figure those guys out, but I mean, if you're the Angels, I guess you can't be thinking that way of like, oh, we're not going to go get these guys because we know we're not going to develop them. I mean, that's just insane.
They
So,
also have this weird tendency where if they draft guys out of college, they'll just bring
mhm.
them to the big leagues immediately.
Yeah, yeah, what they did last year with Schwannell or whatever, and then
They did
they
it again.
traded Luis Garcia to the Red Sox. Sorry, for a pool of prospects. As much as we talked about like, oh, Taylor Ward, Taylor Ward, Taylor Ward, Taylor Ward, Taylor Ward. If I'm being totally honest, I feel as though there just was not a ton of like momentum towards Taylor Ward actually being available. You know what I'm saying? Like all the reports that came out were like side reports of like, oh, there's a little bit of interest. Like, like I felt like it was very much fabricated in fans, like including myself, in fans' minds where he was just an ideal fit for a lot of teams, but I don't think the Angels were like actively shopping him as much. And, like, besides that, like, they don't really have a ton that I think excited a lot of teams and teams wanted to give up prospects for
Well, he's a
besides
backup
Estevez.
player. You'd ideally only play him against left-handed
Platoon.
pitching.
Yeah.
He's a platoon piece, and I mean, if you look at like Kevin Kiermaier's a platoon piece, Eloy Jimenez is a platoon piece. They just weren't going to get any good. Like no one was going to overpay
For a platoon guy. Yeah,
for a
no, for
platoon
sure.
guy.
Yeah, and, like, I guess if no one was calling really about Kevin Pillar, like, no one was calling about Kevin Pillar. Like, it
They just
just
don't have any players that would be attractive at the trade deadline. Like they weren't going to trade Logan O'Hoppe. They weren't going to trade Zachary Neto. They
yeah,
weren't going to trade like Luis Rengifo. You know,
yeah. Yeah, and then to look at Oakland, I guess, they traded the one guy that I wanted the
Airsig
Phillies
to
to
the
be in on,
Royals.
Lucas Erceg. The Royals had a nice deadline. We didn't give it, I guess, the respect, but the Royals got some nice pieces to kind of fill out their roster to, I think, mainstay a potential playoff push. Um, and I think Erceg is going to be a nice guy. You look at bad teams with good bullpens, that setup man usually is a lot less expensive than whoever their main closer is. And I think the Royals knew that and they took advantage of it. But they didn't trade any of their main guys, and you know what? I'm happy they didn't. I don't, you know, Mason Miller. We talked about. Everyone's been talking about him at length for who's gonna get Mason Miller? Who's gonna for a guy that has 5 years, 6 years of control, and
And a
obviously,
torn UCL, partial
yeah,
torn UCL. He's pitching with.
yeah, and he broke his left off hand, non-throwing hand, pinky, whatever. I know it's very difficult to predict reliever volatility because, it's such a volatile position. It's such a variable position. A reliever can look nails one year and then be bad the next year, and it wouldn't be anything more than just like, it just kind of happens. So I think that maybe shied a few teams away from giving up as much as the A's were probably asking for him. However, I think it's good that Oakland keeps him, not to be like, oh, for when they're winning or whatever, but they got some nice young pieces out there. I don't think they needed to sell him right now. I think you could still, if he follows up this year with another really good first half next year, and a little more writings on the wall, and maybe a team loses a closer to injury or something. I think that then at that point, there will be legitimate interest, and the A's may consider to do it next year. And in terms of Brent Rooker, I think it's just a guy that they view as very fun and they want to keep, and just another guy that I think you'd be able to, uh, you know, hang on to and move in the future. I mean, he's not a guy that's a free agent until 2028, so that's a guy with another handful of years of control. So I think it would be wiser of them to hold on and kind of see if he repeats it again
Yeah,
next
and
year
if you
that
look
you
at
can
the
move.
contending teams, Michael, I feel like a lot of them didn't need a DH. The Phillies don't need a DH. The Dodgers definitely don't need a DH.
They can have a
The
DH.
what?
They cannot have a DH.
Yeah, they cannot have a DH. The Yankees
They
probably could use a DH, but you're stuck with Stanton, and then it's
and
like,
like Stan's having a nice-ish enough year. It's like the days that Stan's out of the lineup, you're DHing Judge. So like they really didn't have that's a more similar situation to the Phillies where there's just a lot of guys that could probably DH. It's just clogged. Yeah, like Brent Rooker's inability to play the outfield, I think hurt his value. Not even his value as much as it just hurt his interest. Like I think his value is pretty highly regarded among the league and among contenders, and they were willing to pay a nice price. But I think just his inability to really be able to play the outfield without
I
you
agree, because
having
I
a
feel like
huge
a lot of
concern.
these teams, Michael, with the DH spot, love it to give guys a break and still keep their bats in the lineup, where it's not like it was in the past in the American League, where it's like Jim Thomey's 37 years old. We don't want him playing the infield anymore. He's going to be our DH, and then you're just all going to have to suck it up, basically.
Yeah,
The
no,
other,
it's guys are DHs for strategic reasons. And listen, you have to be. It's a known position for everybody now. I think that with Brent Rooker, it would benefit him if he like learned how to play and played a lot of like first base
can
in the
I?
off season
I
because
agree.
I think a team like
That's a good take.
I think a team like Cleveland or a team like Houston would have been all over it if he could have played first base.
I agree. But also keep this in mind too. Like Randy Arozarena is, I would say, a more attractive name than Brent Rooker, and obviously with the postseason experience, that the Athletics. I think the Athletics, even though Langoliers is playing pretty well, and like ideally, like Langoliers is right now is probably at least at the plate hitting better than Sean Murphy is,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And then obviously the Matt Olson trade was just I mean, I don't know if any of the. I mean, Christian Pache was the centerpiece, and unfortunately,
Yeah, I mean that trade was a mess. I mean, I feel as though that if the A's are making any
oh,
sort of trades,
they got Langoliers for Matt Olson.
yeah, it was Langoliers,
Who,
Pache. I forget the rest of that
Sean, I'm
trade.
looking up Sean Murphy trade. And I wonder if Ersig was one of those players, because that'd be kind of cool, because
Yeah.
like it kind of shows like the A's are like sneaky, can win trades. It's just
Yeah, it
Oh,
just.
they got Estuary Ruiz in that Sean Murphy trade.
Oh, yeah. I remember. Well, it's Estuary Ruiz. I think he's a solid, fine enough player. It's just that the A's, I think, were going to be patient in terms of and there's no reason for them to rush. Both those guys are going to be here next year. Both those guys could have a good year next year, and then you can think about, you know, trading them for more serious stuff. But moving on to the National League, we can stay out west. Start with the NL West. The Los Angeles Dodgers,
They did what they normally do at the trade
they
deadline.
did very Dodgers things. Uh
Kiermaier.
they got depth fielders, depth position players, Kevin Kiermaier, um, Eddie Rosario, Ahmed Rosario, sorry. And then they were a part of that three-team trade that got Tommy Edman, Michael Kopech, two nice players, and then they filled it out with Jack Flaherty, and I thought that was a nice move for them. They needed pitching help in the worst way, mostly rotation help, as their rotation was literally just like
So is Ahmed
being held
Rosario
together
going
by
to play
paper.
shortstop so Mookie doesn't have to play shortstop anymore?
Like, I don't think so because I think they liked Mookie at shortstop enough. I think they just got depth pieces where it's like now you can put now you can put Rosario at short. You have Tommy Edman who can also is capable of playing shortstop in the outfield. They have like a ton of movable, versatile defenders at this point that I think it's smart for them to just acquire as many guys as they can and let Dave Roberts kind of plug and play where he sees fit and what
Dave
best
Roberts is
suits the
also an
team.
idiot.
He is an idiot, but there's a lot of options that I think kind of fits. And they went and got pitching. Michael Kopech's gonna be a nice bullpen piece for them, and I think Jack Flaherty was a pretty solid consolation prize for not being able to get, I think, some of the other starters that they hoped were available. With Glass now basically going to like I don't know if he's already passed how many innings he's the most innings he's ever thrown in a season, but he's pretty damn close and definitely going to pass it once the playoffs roll around. Kershaw has not looked great since coming, finally getting healthy, and everyone else just seemingly is injured out there for them. So yeah, they needed pitching help, and Flaherty checks that box. The next team, the Arizona Diamondbacks, or yeah, the Arizona Diamondbacks. They had a nice little deadline as well. Hold on, that's under D backs with the thing. So they got Dylan Floro, which was a nice little bullpen piece. They got Josh Bell for cash, which the Marlins waiving him I thought was weird, but they I mean, Josh Bell has been a thorn in the Phillies side for some time, has been a guy that's just kinda hit wherever he's gone to an extent and, definitely gonna be rejuvenated on a playoff team, and they needed to get a first baseman as Christian Walker went down with an oblique injury, and God knows how serious that is. And they also got AJ Puck, which was a weird trade because the prospect they gave up, Davison De Los Santos, had absurd stats in the minor leagues, and they just
Yeah,
moved him for what was like an underperforming reliever. Like it was a guy that they
yeah, he's cooked.
Marlins
AJ
Marlins
Puck
tried to
was.
turn Marlins tried to turn AJ Puck into a starter and then didn't work out. So then they put him back in the bullpen and like he was fine enough. I don't know. Weird trade for the Diamondbacks there, but overall, I think they pushed some of the right buttons that they are in a position to make the
Well,
playoffs.
I think the big thing for them is that Corbin Carroll's kind of coming back and getting back
Yeah.
into what he kind of looked like last year. And I think they feel like with that, they're going to start winning a lot more games. Now, obviously, Michael, the most controversial team at the Major League Trade deadline, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Was Diego Padres. I mean, this moves were made that were
You were about
like
to say mistakes were made, and then you corrected yourself.
it was because I don't think they got bad players per se. I just think that these are moves that it's like the Padres are like, listen, we need to push it if we are going to win something, and F it, I'm blowing it all up and I'm doing it now. And that, they got Martin Perez from the Pirates, which was like a flurry at the end of the deadline. That was fine. Jason Adam from the Rays, which was nice. Um, the big one, which I
Tanner
just
Scott.
did not love as a whole, is they got Tanner Scott and Brian Hoying from the Marlins for 4 top prospects for the Pirates. They paid the steepest price for Tanner Scott, who is a rental. And listen, if I have to be honest, that will absolutely sure out the back half of their bullpen. Robert Suarez has been pretty disgusting all season. Jeremiah Estrada has been a nice, piece for them. Getting Tanner Scott will definitely be an intimidating back three, basically, for them. And I think that was a nice acquisition, at least. But the prospect pool that they gave up, I mean, it made the Carlos Estevez trade look like an you know, utter robbery on the Phillies' perspective, considering how much that the Marlins gave up for him. Like it felt like if the Phillies were going to get Tanner Scott, they were going to have to trade like Aiden
Yeah,
Miller.
it really felt that the Marlins, when the Marlins have done their fire sales in the past, more often than not, they really do like reload their whole organization.
Yeah, I think they kind of nailed their deadline. Like, just, but even between what they got for, you know, AJ Puck even, and then what they're getting for Tanner Scott, Jazz Chisholm. So I think they kind of just nailed it. We'll talk about it a
Yeah,
little
their
bit more, but
GM, who I mean, also forget they traded Luis Arias early in the
like very
season,
early in the season.
very early in the season, and I think we thought that they got fleeced a little in that, but obviously then they went back and they made the Padres pay out the wazoo for Tanner Scott anyway. So now
It
that
was almost like a hey, you owe us for a rise, by the way. Like,
yeah, it's crazy, dude. Like
yeah, yeah. It was an interesting move.
it was very like hinky era Sixers esque of what they did at
Yeah,
the deadline.
and I got to applaud them. Like, shout out the Marlins. Obviously they're losers always for and forever for like not actually ever being serious with their things, but they had an opportunity to sell and they sold everybody. We'll talk about it. They sold more guys. Like, it wasn't even just them. But anyways, next we have the San Francisco Giants, which that's another like average team that's kind of in the thick of the break or
I
of
think
the
I
of the
think
race.
you despise them for the trade they made with the Braves with a certain
Yeah,
Cuban
like they
outfielder,
got they got Mark Canna as a rental bat. And
which
they
doesn't make
traded
sense.
away, and like it was like Mark Canna's just I think the direct replacement for Jorge Soler, which obviously they traded him to the Braves, and like I don't know, the
I am
Braves.
very surprised the Giants did not move Blake Snell.
I mean, he just threw a no hitter yesterday.
Like he looks like he's back.
I just don't know how thick his market was. I think teams were just kind of look. Blake Snell's had great second halves throughout his entire career. Like, it's very strange a guy that's been able to turn it on like that in the second half so much.
Bruh,
But
the Astros sold the farm for Yusei Kikuchi.
yeah, I guess you could have got Snell.
I
Yeah,
think Blake Snell could have fetched way more. I mean, like if the Orioles were so desperate for a lefty that they overpaid for Taylor Rogers. You mean to
yeah,
tell me they wouldn't have overpaid to get Blake Snell?
yeah. I guess, and it's just that like the Giants, they traded away Soler to the Braves, and that sort of move, like they're 500. They're 500 team right now that can certainly push for a wild card spot and make the playoffs. And like selling off Soler and not getting what I thought was a fantastic return just to I don't know, like it's like you're moving off a veteran, letting some young guys play, but it's like still want to make the playoffs. I don't know, you just signed him. He was in his first year of a 3-year contract. It felt like a weird move. Maybe they know something. Soler was ultimately disappointing to start, but such is the life of power hitters in San Francisco, not named Barry Bonds. Like, they just don't really exist. They've kind of always struggled in that ballpark, and what's happening with Soler. So that's why I didn't love the signing to begin with. And now you're moving off of him. It felt like you're just getting Mark Canna just to kind of fill up that roster space. I don't know. I didn't love it. Um, the Rockies, they really didn't do anything. They traded a
Well,
couple guys.
They don't have much to trade. Like
Right,
if you're
right.
the
They didn't have
Rockies, why
anything
would you
there.
move
So
Brenton Doyle?
yeah, they traded Jalen Beeks and Nick Mears. Not really needle movers.
They're kind of remind me when the Phillies, like the 2015, 2016, like awful era Phillies were like sell, sell, sell. It's like, what do they have to sell? Like Jeremy
Yeah,
Hellickson,
exactly. They just didn't have anything.
Mar Gomez.
Yeah. All right. Moving to the Central, the Milwaukee Brewers with a 6.5 game lead on the Cardinals for first place in the Central.
They got Nick
Uh,
Mears.
they got Nick Mears and they got Frankie Montas, which I thought was a nice little move to help shore out the
Intriguing
rotation.
move because
Yeah,
we know that the
similar.
Brewers they perform like the Rays devil magic at their stadium for these
Yeah,
pitchers.
yeah. I mean, similarly enough to the Guardians, they're having a very uncharacteristic good season with their starting rotation being bad. I mean, it was one of their only strengths the last few years, and you know, you didn't expect a team that traded away Corbin Burns and didn't even
Fired their
really,
manager or let their manager
yeah,
walk in free agency.
yeah, and like didn't even like try to replace uh Corbin Burns really, just kind of stuck with what they had. You didn't
And then
expect them to
Brandon
be
Woodruff
playing
is
this
hurt
well.
too.
Exactly, and you didn't expect them to be playing this well, and they are, and so they got some rotation help, and I think Montes is a nice, enticing player that I still feel like teams view him as a guy that can also get better on top of what he's just doing, so fine move. They didn't do anything that needle moving, and I think they don't really have to kinda win the division and then go from there. Next is the Cardinals, who they had that was the big thing, three-team trade that I think they honestly nailed. Eric Fedde, uh, obviously, again, having a good first half, and the Cardinals desperately needed some pitching help. They have the most, like it's like you talk about names, like, "Oh, how did names sound?" When you get guys, their rotation has some of the worst names ever, like Kyle Gibson, Lance
Lance Lynn.
Lynn, Eric Fetty. None of those names are very inspiring. Sonny Gray is very good, but everything else is just kinda eh. Um, but, it's doing
Yeah,
enough
but
of a job.
Eric Fetty is the Clayton Kershaw of the Lance Lynn's.
I guess that's a good move then. They also got Tommy Pham, which is a little reunion for them. Um, you know, it's been a while since he's been there, and they traded away Dylan Carlson to Tampa for another arm. So
Sean
we'll see.
Armstrong.
Yeah. Um, Next is the Pirates, which you talk about losers of the deadline. I'm definitely quantifying them as a loser. Because they did nothing. I thought that they had an
Well,
opportunity.
well, they
They did nothing
well,
inspiring. Like, they did nothing like, they traded away Martin Perez, they got
yeah,
Jalen
but he
Beeks,
sucks.
they traded away Quinn Priester, and then they got IKF and Brian De La Cruz, and it's just like, me personally, I think that's a bit of a letdown. You look at their rotation, with
They also got
Skeens.
Jalen Beeks,
Yeah, I mean, they got Skeens, Mitch Keller, and,
Jared Jones.
Jaron Jones, which is a very, very fun young top three, and they have some nice bats in there. O'Neal Cruz, um, Cabrian Hayes. They got guys that is the makings of a little fun team, and they were in the thick of the wild card race, and all of a sudden you just like you had an opportunity to go make some moves and get some nice bats to the point where you could have gotten to a playoffs, into playoff position, and in a best of 3 wild card round, could have absolutely beaten almost anybody, in the National League when you have those top 3 starting pitchers. Those 3 young starting pitchers are absolutely capable of taking 2 of 3 from a team that's better than them just because they shut down their offense, and all of a sudden you're playing in the division series and you're having fun. You're having fun in October, and they didn't even try. They just kind of sat there and got like fake moves with IKF and Brian De La Cruz. I don't know. I just felt like they could have been, if the Giants were selling someone like Jorge Soler, like I thought that would have been a nice little trade they could have made to go get a bat and fill it out. But yeah, regardless, just nothing all that exciting. So moving on, we have the Cubs, which we kind of talked about. They were one of those middle ground teams, trading for Isak Paredes for Christopher Morel. Eh, well, what do you think? Like again, like I think Morel has a ton of talent, and maybe they didn't want to.
Morel kind of reminds me of he's like the third base version of Kyle Schwarber.
Oh, wow, interesting. Yeah, ton of talent. One of those players that's like his theoretical value and what he's supposed to like grow into is maybe something that Cubs don't feel like they can achieve. And a guy like Paredes, who's got some years under control, I feel like, is a nice player. But we talked about that ballpark being difficult to hit in, especially for a guy like him. So might not be a great move
Yeah,
for the Cubs.
I think the Cubs are kind of a loser because we thought they were sellers and then they became a weird buyer and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they just didn't do anything else after that.
hmm
Um, the Reds, probably the most disappointing team in baseball, in my opinion.
I
I
was just
think,
about to say they're having, I think, one of the most disappointing seasons for sure.
and I don't think like they don't have anyone beside Montas to really like trade because you're not going to move Hunter Green. You're not going to move Nick. Like they have so many young
They
guys.
traded Lucas Sims and Frankie Montas, and it's just like you exactly. You're 1,000% on the money there. That all their guys are like young, and I think guys that they hope grow into,
Like
you know,
they're just gonna can David Bell at the end of the season and then probably hire like a legit manager. And then
mhm.
they're probably gonna maybe go out in free agency and add a couple nice pieces and then reload for next year.
Yeah, because it's like you look at a team like the Reds, if they were going to trade away any of their young guys that they didn't love, like those aren't enticing chips for contending teams. Like no team wants to buy a young underperforming player
Well, the
from a team
Phillies
that
do
was like
that.
I was just about to say, like, Brandon Marsh was not an exception, but it's like the Phillies traded a prospect that kinda had no room to grow in the organization in Ohapi to get Brandon Marsh as a developmental piece for them where the Reds, it's just a lot more rare to make those sort of trades, and I just don't know if any team are interested. And that moves us to the East. We can start down up so we can end with the
I mean, the
Phillies.
Marlins we said were the clear winners.
Nailed it. They sold beautifully. Um, the Washington Nationals, I don't think teams were as like interested. Like they traded Jesse Winker to the Mets, which is a very
Well, they
meh
had to move
move.
those guys because you got to bring up Dylan Cruz and give James
hmm
Wood everyday playing time.
Yeah, like they traded some bullpen arms, and then they traded uh Lane Thomas, and that's fine. I don't think teams were that interested in Kyle
I think
Finnegan.
that's good moves for them because like you're in a sense like trimming the fat and you're getting extra prospects you'd maybe not have anticipated entering the season because on paper they look terrible and they're
hmm
overachieving with some of their young players like they're hitting their potential
hmm
and like CJ Abrams is like looking like is an all-star, right?
Yeah, Mackenzie Gore looks really, really good, and it's just like
Yeah, like they're kind
it's
of like
just
the
it's they're
Orioles
a
from a couple
team.
years ago. They
Yeah,
just
it's like they're overperforming, and even they're still not good. Like they're like still like 12 games under 500, but they're overperforming, and when they're going to be good, guys like Lane Thomas are not going to be really a part of it. So, like you said, trimming the fat, good moves. The Mets are playing just
they're a
generally good
joke. They
baseball.
are an
They're
actual joke, and I'm going to tell you why I think they're a joke.
oh man.
They went on this amazing hot streak. They could make they can make the playoffs, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So their like big move was not trading, that loser Pete Alonso.
Yeah, it was their big move was keeping what they had because they were projected sellers up until the last like month
Their
where
big
they
move was picking up a middle of the rotation like Fugazi All-Star in Paul Blackburn. No offense to Paul Blackburn, but it's like when the A's are like losing 110 games and you're required to send someone to the All-Star game,
Mhm.
he's like the guy.
Yeah, so like the Mets I think they had an opportunity to
And
buy,
Stanek
but
sucks.
but I also think them standing pat's not a bad idea, to be totally honest with you, because they're gonna have to re-sign Pete Alonso in the offseason, and I don't think they wanted to take on anything that was, like, controllable past this year or whatever, and it's a team that they can push for the playoffs, but they can also, like, for what the Mets are, they might just not be good enough to make the playoffs anyways. Kodai Senga gets hurt as soon as he gets back in the thing. Like, that's a huge
Edwin
loss.
Diaz is like
Edwin Diaz has not been,
going
the
through it.
same. That is just even though they went on this crazy hot streak, and even if they bought and got some good pieces, it just feels more likely that they kind of flame out by the end of the season and miss the playoffs anyways. That it might have been smart not to mortgage some things and then really focus on the offseason on improving the squad.
Well, the
Uh,
Mets have one of the deeper farm systems in baseball,
mhm.
but I also think too as well. I don't know. It's just to me,
It
I
could have been
find
better.
it,
I hear you. I
I
hear you.
find it, but I find it interesting that they soft bought, but they soft bought pieces they have to fix, and
Right.
like they're not known for like fixing players. Like
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
players were all established players, like
Mhm.
Lindor. Um, oh, God, I
Mm.
hate this guy so much. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, Nimmo?
Yeah, that loser Brandon Nimmo, and then like
Yeah.
Pete Alonso, like
Yeah,
Jeff
like
McNeil is cooked. You
yeah.
know, like like things like that. Like Ahmed Rosario would have been a good player for them to pick up because he's having a good season.
Yeah. It's they're in a spot. The
That-
Braves, they're doing their 2021 thing. They go get Jorge Soler. They added Eddie Rosario off
Who's one of the
waivers.
worst hitters in baseball, but
Yeah, and like Adam Duvall having a very down year. The Braves, they're winning now. They're playing bad teams, obviously, and are winning.
I think the
But
Jorge Soler move is stupid, and I'm going to tell you why I think it's dumb for them.
go ahead.
You already have a Jorge Soler on the roster who's better than Jorge Soler, and his name is Marcelo Zuna.
Yeah, like one of those guys having to play the field now, and it's going to be Soler that's in the field, unless he's not playing every day, which I don't view the Braves as doing that at the moment. Listen, they're trying to recoup some 2021. I think they're seeing the writing on the wall. They're seeing the vibes of the Phillies and the Phillies down vibes at the moment, and I think that they're just seeing that the NL wild card race is tightening up, and that they might be able to get some pieces and go on and get hot at the right time is kind of what their hope is. I'm sure. I don't think they did anything like terrible. Like they didn't mortgage anything crazy for him. Like the Giants kind of sold them
I
off for
think my
nothing.
buddy, I told you this before, my buddy Gino went down to Disney World and
Hmm.
he ran into, there were some Braves fans there. And apparently the Braves are like, they're acting like this is a rebuilding year because of all their injuries.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that, which makes me think the Jorge Soler move is dumb because it doesn't fit the team, what they have. And if you're quote unquote rebuilding, like realistically, Michael, like if you're the Braves with all these old guys and you want
Mhm.
to get younger and free up like your payroll, this is gonna sound kind of like disgusting, but like God, like what would they have gotten if they traded Chris Sale?
Oh, man. I mean, they would've got a lot.
Like they could have
Cy Young?
like they basically could have like, and they develop players. So like they could
Yeah, they
have
coulda totally
gotten,
restocked some
they could have totally
but the
raked
pro
the Orioles over the coals for
the
Chris Sale.
problem is, though, is that you're gonna make the playoffs, like, and they're gonna be competing, they know they won a World Series with
But
a
Chris Sale's never
roster that
healthy.
looked
This
like
is the
this.
first time he's been healthy in 5 years.
Listen, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think they'd rather ride it off than go give a contender, like, your guy. Like, they were never gonna like, teams that would've been in on him would've been the Orioles, and it would've been, like, the Dodgers, and they were never
Yankees.
gonna yeah, and they were never trading him to the Dodgers, and I don't think they wanted to trade him to I understand what you're saying. I think it would've been too
Astros.
I think it would've been too pretty of a chip to trade away they're still trying to compete. Like Braves fans are saying, "Oh, this is a rebuild year for them because their guys are hurt." Like it's not. Like they weren't gonna be sellers at the deadline because of it and try to tank their way out of the playoffs. Like they're gonna just they weren't gonna actively get like significantly worse by trading away Chris Sale. I mean, what was their stat for a big bulk of the early summer that it was, if their starters are giving up less than like 3 runs, they're winning every single time. Like, it was like it would have been totally getting rid of what their strong suit has been, which has been their rotation. I think it would have been too much of a hyper sell to do something like that. And that leaves us with the Phillies, who, if I'm being totally honest, I think they had a really nice deadline. I think they got I like the prospect they got back for Gregory Soto from the Orioles. That's, a guy that's gonna slot in as like a top 5 Phillies prospect as he was a top 10 Orioles prospect. Um, Moving William Bergola, I don't have any issues with because he was kind of almost exclusively a second baseman at this point, and despite like, yeah, he can hit, there was just really no place for him, in the organization, and I think Tanner Banks is a nice little piece that, is forgive me for a second. He's not a rental. He has control until 2029. So it's a controllable piece that I think the Phillies view as a guy that they can develop. I'm not saying they think it's like Alvarado, for example. I think they're aware that it's not as good, but I do believe that they trust themselves that they can turn him into a viable option for the next 5 years, basically. And then the Austin Hayes move, I don't love the fact that they're considering him an everyday player at this point, but just the state of the team at the moment, he's been having better at bats than a lot of the players on the team, so it's whatever. And he plays like hard. You can tell he plays hard. He hustles. He's hit a home run. He's come damn close to hitting more in that left field corner. Um, Ultimately, I don't think his you know, ask for the Phillies if he is gonna play every day, like, he's gonna be in the bottom of the order anyway, so, doesn't matter a ton, and they moved off Seranthony because that club option seemed everything but a guarantee from the Phillies' perspective on them opting into keeping him. Um, Obviously moving Pache, who is now a Marlin, and finally, the big trade, like we talked about, Klassen and Alguersuari for Carlos Estevez, who has been nailed since Memorial Day and has continued to be pretty solid in the Phillies bullpen, despite the fact that they've been losing some games at this point. So
Yeah,
I like their deadline.
I think their deadline was adequate, but I will say this, Michael, and this is kind of my frustration right now with the organization. I think overall is I feel like they don't go heavy at the deadline because they're waiting to make the big move, like the off season, which is
Mhm.
like, which is great. Like they like last like 2 years, like 2022, they didn't want to make a big move because they planned on going after
Trey
Trey
Turner,
Turner.
right?
And like Trey Turner obviously wanted to come back to the East Coast, and he's friends with Bryce Harper. And when he played for the Nationals, he was really impressed with like the Phillies organization and like the fans, etc. And
Yeah,
obviously now the big reason the Phillies didn't go out and spend for like Robert or even Randy Arozarena or someone of that caliber is rumored has it is that if Juan Soto's available in free agency, the Phillies would go and pay a boatload of money because they made two gigantic offers. They made two large offers for Shohei Otani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, despite them claiming they didn't have the payroll to do it. It's just that they both really wanted to be Dodgers.
yeah,
So my thing is if this team like pulls a 2023 Eagles and just like limps to the end finish line and gets bounced in the wild card round or like
the
the
division series.
the division series, like there's gonna come a point with Dombrowski. And I think maybe Dombrowski's hesitancy with trading big name prospects is because that's why he got fired from the Red Sox.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why
like
they fired
he was put in a bind where it became damned if you do, damned if you don't. Where unfortunately for Dombrowski, I don't know. Like I was never gonna trade. Like I think the Luis Robert negotiations went. The Phillies called, and the White Sox said, "We want Andrew Painter, we want Aiden Miller, and maybe we want Eduardo Tate as well." And like, what do you got? And the Phillies said, "Okay, I'm gonna hang up the phone. You call us back when you have a serious offer." And I just don't think the White Sox ever called back. So, like, it just the way that this was such a seller's market and as expensive as everything turned out to be, we saw how expensive Tanner Scott was. We saw how expensive Yusei Kikuchi was. We saw, even Randy Arozarena wasn't cheap. Yeah, it felt like any of the bats that they did want, like outside of someone like Austin Hayes, so they clearly wanted Austin Hayes. Dombrowski said he's been trying to trade for him for 3 years. Um, eh, it felt like it was like comfortably out of the Phillies' price range. And listen, I understand the hesitancy generally, like, oh, they didn't make the big move, whatever. They're at a point where, if it's really going to be like the 2023 Eagles, their big move was Saquon Barkley. That's pretty equivalent to like one. So, anyways, in terms of just name value, but the Phillies, just to move off of the trade deadline generally, are playing just such piss poor baseball right now, and a lot of it has to do with their best player, who has like a 430 OPS since the All-Star break. Um, his batting average dropped from 301 to like 274. His OPS has dropped like 75 points in like 8 games. Bryce Harper has been abysmal. He has been terrible. There's no other way to put it. It's the worst baseball he's played in his career by miles
the
upon
conspiracy
miles.
theory is that they're not talking extension and he's just like mad or something.
I mean, I think that's a pretty poor conspiracy. Like we know what Bryce is. We know how much he cares. Like I truly just think he's in a rut and a deeper rut that he's ever been in, and that's disappointing. Trey Turner's also slumping pretty badly. Um, Kyle Schwarber, like less so than those guys, definitely, but still not great. And Real Muto has not looked good since coming off the IL. Bryson Stott, like it's Brandon Marsh has been kind of struggling for the better part of a few weeks now. It's just like if you're going to win a World Series, if you're going to have a deep playoff run, if you're going to have any sort of success, it is on the back of your guys. Like no trade deadline acquisitions were going to push this team to be able to cover the slumps of Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber. Like if those three guys are slumping at the same time, I'm sorry, they are not winning anything. They are not beating anybody, and that's just simply fact. You are not getting away with your three best hitters being ass in any playoff series ever. It's just never ever going to happen. The Phillies the '08 to 2011 Phillies were never ever going to win a playoff series if Rollins, Utley, and Howard were struggling. It was never going to happen, and it never did happen. So, I understand the frustration with the deadline, but I think more of the frustration needs to be directed at your best players not being good right now, and that's why you're not winning. Because if you look at your deadline acquisitions thus far, they've all been pretty good. Austin Hayes is having good at bats. Estevez has looked great. Tanner Banks has looked great. So, and the guys you trade away don't look great. So, I- you know, the Phillies
I
are
think
very
my, I mean,
frustrating. It's
my,
just
I
what
mean,
it
I think
is.
where I'm coming from, Michael, and I understand because a lot of these guys were expensive. I kind of would have liked another starting pitcher with Ranger because you brought this up. Rangers never throw more than 130 innings in a
Yeah,
season, and now he's on the injured list. And we
with
know
like
he can pitch
rest.
out of the pen, and we know he can start, and he doesn't mind either one. And I think my point is get someone that's not Cody Allard or And I know, and I felt bad for him last night, Tyler Phillips, because he just got lit
listen,
up like a
like
Christmas tree,
Tyler,
which was expected. I thought that was expected after
yeah,
throwing a
because
complete game the other
Because
night.
Tyler Phillips is like he was never a ranked prospect in minor league baseball that was called up just because they needed someone and had a nice few starts against some bad lineups. Like it was only a matter of time before
But
he
now
got lit up.
now it's like with Taiwan, it's like now we need Taiwan to come back up and not pitch like shit. Like that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, as much as it goes, like, the pitching hasn't been like Nola had a fine start against the Yankees, 5 2/3, 2 earned runs. Like he battled, it was fine. It was nothing I'm really gonna complain too much about. But like Wheeler got bombed by the Yankees. Like that's two starts now where Wheeler got absolutely obliterated by some AL contenders.
Which means he's
Like
probably going to do his like 2 week summer vacation
he
injured
probably
list.
need
So
yeah, he
now, like, who's going to pitch? Like
I
Cody
get it.
Allard, like
Today they're
Cody
doing
Allard
an opener.
blows.
I know Allard's bad, and listen, he
Like,
had a
and then now you're
fine
like,
start.
now you're thinking like, shoot, like, do we gotta have Matt Strom now to have like a 3 inning like opener game and do bullpen
Well,
games?
they're going to do some bullpen games. I think today Orion Kerkering's going to open, and then they're going to go to Allard for a few, and then probably just turn it over to the rest of the bullpen. And look, Rangers IL stint, I think is strict. Like I'm going to say, it's probably strictly rest. I do really believe that he just needed a break. Them saying as soon as they put him on that they expect him to be off as soon as the days are up leads me to believe that he's fine. Um, Taiwan Walker, he's throwing minor league outings. Like he's gonna be fine to probably pitch soon. Tanner Banks is also a multi-inning reliever that they could have a spot start, let him throw a few innings just to start off a bullpen game. Like they The pitching, I'm less worried about. Truthfully, I am because I do believe in Wheeler. I do believe in Nola. I do believe in Ranger. I do believe in Sanchez. That come playoff time, everything will be fine with those guys. I think they're going to be smart managing Rangers innings and outings the rest of the season. And I think maybe Wheeler takes a little week off IL stint, or they skip a start here or there, whatever.
I
To
guess
get
what
him
I'm
geared
saying,
for the
like,
playoffs.
I ridiculed the Mets for getting Paul Blackburn because like they're an unserious team. Like Paul Blackburn might have been like they wouldn't have to give up much because the Mets only traded one prospect, and
Mhm.
like realistically, like I would feel more comfortable knowing like we have the flexibility to give Wheels like that 10-day
Yeah,
injured
and
list rest.
yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I do think that there was room for them to get a low end starter just to pick up a few things, but I think they might use Tanner Banks in that situation. Like I actually do think that he might be used in that sort of situation coming up maybe. But like truthfully, not for nothing, I think everyone's forgotten how much they wish they didn't push Spencer Turnbull early in the season, but no, that's neither here nor there. Um,
Yeah, I
Would
mean,
have been would have been nice to have Turnbull now, wouldn't have been? Oh,
well,
but we
he's
needed to get
supposed to come
Taiwan
back.
over the
Maybe
rotation.
that okay. I kind of forgot about Turnbull. Now
When's
I
he
kind
supposed to come back? Is he going to come back?
in
I didn't
August.
know.
He,
I haven't heard any update on him. Like
let's look
maybe
at
by the end of the month.
Spencer. Oh my god, I almost typed in Spencer Howard. Oh, garbage,
Oh,
Garbo.
very nice.
All right, Phillies news: Andrew Painter, Taiwan Walker, Spencer Turnbull, all making progress. This is that ball out. That ball's out of here. Let's see. Andrew Painter has started
He
throwing
looks,
off of a
yeah.
mound. Taiwan Walker made his first rehab appearance the other night, and Spencer Turnbull is now throwing again. He'll continue to his rehab in Clearwater. If he's at rehabbing and he's fine, that means he's going to come back up.
Okay, so
Spencer
that
Turnbull is going to save the season coming
he's
back
going
to
to give
do.
everybody a breather in September. Um, but listen, yeah, I could have maybe used a little starter back end, whatever. We talked about it. They are not going anywhere without the lineup, and they need to
Well,
just
that's what
figure
I
it
mean.
out.
Like, dude, like if Bryce
There
Harper
was no
literally has
replacing.
the worst slump ever of his career, he's just going to get murdered.
Yeah, like there was no Bryce Harper replacement. There's no Trey Turner replacement. There's no Kyle Schwarber replacement. There's no JT Realmuto replacement out there for these guys.
But let's wrap up the show with just the people freaking out of the whole 2023 Eagle vibes with this team. The 2023 Eagles, when they were 11-1, was the most laborious 11-1 watch in like
Yeah,
I have ever seen. Where this
there's
Phillies
key
team
differences.
is better than the last two teams they have had.
Yeah, like you look at the 2023 Eagles. That team had talent. That team was talented and was more talented than what they were at the end of the season. Absolutely. But you're right. The way they got to 11-1 was anything but inspiring. They never put a team away. They just kind of won because the team ran out of time. It didn't you didn't feel great coming off of any sort of one of their 11 wins, truthfully. You didn't feel great about any of them. And their coaching was an utter disaster, and it
Their scheming was an utter
yes,
disaster.
yes, and it just led them to underperforming their talent by a lot and, the ultimate collapse. The Phillies got to, the first team to 60 wins, and it was not a laborious 60 wins. It was not they're winning, but they're feeling like super lucky. Like, no, they had the best first inning run differential. I think they still do, jumping out on leads. The rotation was nails. It wasn't like, oh man, like these guys are getting so lucky. Like, no, Wheeler, Ranger, Nola, Sanchez all looked fantastic. Their back end of the bullpen looked really good. Like everything looked great. And, you know, there's no coaching issue with the Phillies either. It's just their talent is just going through it. It sucks to always chalk things up and be like, "Oh, well, that's just baseball." And I think some of it is just baseball. Like, it is just a sport where there are ebbs and there are flows, and the ebbs and flows last a lot longer than they do in football and other sports. Like, an ebb and flow of football is like one good week, one bad week, or an ebb and flow in baseball could literally last like a month. And, they're a below 500 team since June 1st, and that's struggling and by like a game or two, and it's making everyone panic and freak out. And I get it, I really do. But they were such a good team early in the season, and I think that's what this Phillies team actually is. I do think it's the Phillies of, you know, April and May, and not the Phillies of like July on,
Do you
really
know what
June
this kind
on,
of
but
feels
July
like to
on.
me? This is kind of what it feels like. This is when, like, in 2022, when the Eagles lost that, like, horrible game to the Commanders, and then
On
they
Monday night, yeah.
on Monday night, and then they played the Colts, and they barely beat them. They got really lucky, and we're like, oh my
Yeah,
god,
and like they
that's what
they
this kind of feels like. Where you're like, oh my god, are the wheels gonna fall off? And then they came back and like smoked the Steelers or something.
Yeah, it was like the Eagles that they had parts in that schedule where they had the Commander loss. They barely beat the Colts. Like they beat the Texans, but it didn't feel like they really took it to them. That Bears game was at risk for a good part of it, for sure. And then they took care of business in the playoffs until the Super Bowl. I think the Phillies are in a position where they're not playing good baseball. They're happening to also run into a really tough part of the schedule from the Guardians up all the way through the West Coast trip, which is the Diamondbacks. And like, truthfully, it does not get much easier after the Diamondbacks. Like, you get a break, I guess, with the Marlins and Nationals, but then you immediately are back on the road for the Braves. You're on the road for the Royals, who are playing good baseball. You come back home just to play the Astros and the Braves again, and then you're in September. So, listen, before the season, we all looked at the schedule and we were like, August looks like utter hell. Like you're getting off the heels of the Guardians and Yankees series to then you got to go out. You're starting August out west, Seattle, the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks. Gross. You get a break with some easier teams, but they are divisional opponents. And then it's the Braves, the Royals, the Astros, the Braves again. It's not good. Like it's hard. But then you get into September and you play the Blue Jays, you play the Marlins again, you play the Rays, those are three teams that are just not very good, underperforming, sellers. Then you play the Mets, which, like, they're playing good baseball, but maybe by then they'll be flamed out. You play the Brewers, the Mets again, the Cubs, and the Nat. Like, September is a significantly more easy month than what August is. And I know that this team has struggled in September, and I know that everything looks bleak right now. And for them to have a garbage rest, like, entire month of August would probably cost them the division lead. And I'm not saying they're going to have a bad month of August, but there is, I think, a light at the end of the tunnel. And I know
I
it
hope
is
so.
I know it's very dark at the moment. I really do. And I do truly believe in
The
them to
thing
kind of figure it
I
out.
seen this happen with the 2022 Mets, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
the Phillies are the 2022 Mets, but it's not like this is unprecedented, you know.
Mhm.
So, wrapping up the show now, we'll see what's going to happen. I think the Phillies are very lucky the Eagles had that open practice when this is going on to take away some of the heat they probably should be getting.
Yeah, the Phillies are getting heat, man. I mean, you're seeing it on Twitter. The world's ending on Twitter.
Dude, if Bryce Harper tonight hits like two ding dongs and they win like 10-3, it's going to shut a lot. And then they win the following game on Sunday. I think it's going to be like back to normal.
Well, I think that's what it would take for them to kind of snap out of it. Like, I it's so messed up because I really thought when they beat the Guardians 8-0 and Phillips had the complete game, I thought that was like,
The turning point.
okay. I really actually did. I thought that was going to be like inspiring. I thought that that's going straight into the trade deadline. I thought that that was going to be a move that like push the Phillies to wake up, and they were going to have a nice Yankee series, take 2 of 3. Even if they lost, they still lost Sunday. Like, losing Sunday to the Guardians sucked. You had Schwarber had 2 tanks and you lost. But, I really thought they were going to win the Yankee series before the West Coast trip and the trade deadline. I thought the vibes were going to be back up, and they had an awful Yankee series and an awful first game in Seattle. Like, the vibes are just so bad right now. Nothing is fun. I don't know what they need to kind of snap out of it, but they need their stars to get better. They need Bryce Harper to just not be slumping anymore. He might get a day off today, and I think it could honestly benefit him because he might need to just sit back and watch the team play like hot hats without him. Or hell, he might need to sit back and watch the team finally win a baseball game without him, and it'll get his head out of his ass to really start picking things up
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's just bad right
I'll
now.
close out the show with this, and this is like every Phillies team that's gone on to either win the pennant or win the World Series has gone through some major slump in the
Yes.
season.
Yes.
Let's just hope that
Middle
this
of the summer too.
in the summer. Let's just hope that this is it for this team and it ends soon. And then we'll look back on it and we're like, dude, remember we all freaked out about that
The
horrible
2024
Yankees
Phillies.
series?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
thank you everybody for tuning in. We enjoy you listening to us. We appreciate all your retweets and your likes. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.